Hi, I'm Carrie, a stroke survivor and a member of Bind.
And I'm Kezia, a stroke survivor and member of Bind as well. And today we're going to be listening to Brandon about going back onto driving. That is something that we really find very important after a brain injury survivor to be able to gain back our independence. So he is the owner of Driver Rehabilitation Program in North Texas, H T Driver Rehabilitation Specialist, LLC, which focuses on neurocognologic. I can't say the word right. That's what.
It's a hard word.
Neurologically impaired population.
Like us. Huh? Is it like us?
Yeah, just like us. So we're excited to have him here and having all of you listen to him and giving us more information on going back to drive. So welcome back, Brandon.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Okay. So in the first episode, we talked a lot about modifications and also I can't say these words today, but anyway, we talked about going back to drive. And today we just wanted to know more about the company that you're running and how does that help survivors to go back and to be on the road?
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. So we're an occupational therapy-based program. We do work under a doctor's order, just like you would if you were getting a referral for occupational therapy anywhere. And really that covers us, well, number one, it tells us that yes, these services are recommended. You know, we're not going to see somebody that doesn't have a diagnosis. That's not what we do. And once we get that referral, we do scheduling, all that good stuff, but we start with an evaluation. We call it an OT driver evaluation. It's a comprehensive evaluation that could take up to 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
We do come to your home. However, there is a fee associated with that, or you can come to one of our 2 offices. We have an office in McKinney and one in Flower Mound. So once we kind of get your records, if you've had, intensive therapy, we want those notes. We'll schedule the appointment. During the appointment, we do the initial interview, kind of, what you were doing before your brain injury, kind of your recovery process, and how you're functioning now. That's when we'll ask questions about ADLs and IADLs.
Okay.
Then we get into our testing. We have to test your vision for multiple reasons. Number one, vision is a big part of driving. And like we were talking about, you could have left side neglect, you could have peripheral vision loss, which that's a controversial subject here in the state of Texas as well. We can talk about that later, hemianopsia. That's where you have visual.
I get it. That's a new word for me. I haven't heard.
Yeah, hemianopsia. So we could talk about that later. But so we do the vision test. And of course, we got to test your acuity. We also do some visual perceptual tests, like how the brain and the eyes work together. These are tests that you've probably done before through your course of rehab. And then we get into the physical testing. So we test your strength, your range of motion. We do, kind of your reaction time. We do reaction time behind the wheel. But really your strength, range of motion. We ask about your spasticity, if you have high tone or flaccid tone. Do you have spasms? We get all that information. That's all important to driving. Then we get you behind the wheel. So as we and this gentleman were talking earlier, the clinical testing, that's what I would call the clinical testing, because really it's a 2-part evaluation, clinical and behind the wheel. So the clinical is important. We do the cognitive testing, processing speed, executive functioning skills, divided attention. We're looking at those domains. That's all good to get those scores in the clinic. But then we get you behind the wheel. Now, the level that we test you behind the wheel depends on a multitude of things. How long have you been driving? Are you a new driver? Are you a returning driver? You have to have a valid driver's license or a permit to be seen by our program. Do you need adaptive equipment? So if I'm introducing adaptive equipment, we're probably just going to stay in the parking lot. I'm not going to introduce something and then get you out into 45 mile per hour traffic. I don't know. If you're doing great, I might. I'm not opposed to it. But we progress that up as you're progressing. So if you're doing great in the parking lot, hey, we get you into 25 mile per hour traffic. We'll get you into your neighborhood. And then we're looking at basic maneuvers. Of course, we have an instructor vehicle. We have an instructor brake on the passenger side. So, and we're also trained to take over the vehicle if you're doing something unsafe. We'll hit the brake, put it in neutral, grab the steering wheel, get you over to the side of the road, figure out what's going on. We're also certified driving instructors for the state of Texas. So we have that background, we have the occupational therapy background, and then, of course, we bring it all together with the driver rehab certification. So we've thought about this, you know, and our association has thought about this, ADID, and we take continuing education courses through them. So getting back to our evaluation, if things are going good, we got you in 25 mile per hour traffic. If they're going, you know, well, we keep progressing you up. Now, we get back to the office or your home, depending on the situation, and we talk about recommendations. We tell you how you did on the clinical testing, how you did it behind the wheel, and then we provide recommendations. Recommendations can vary. So if you've had a brain injury and you've returned, you know, and you feel like, and we think that, hey, you're doing great, you know, like you're doing awesome. We might just recommend that you retake the road test at DPS, and we'll help you with that process. If we think you need training, we're going to tell you, hey, we think you need some training. If we think you need equipment, we're going to say, we think you need equipment. This is the equipment we use today. We might switch it depending on, you know, that's an ongoing process. Because we have different versions of this, you know, and we have, you know, of course, like we were talking about earlier, we have left side accelerators, left foot accelerators is what we call them, various pieces of equipment for the steering wheel, hand controls, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Those recommendations are usually done in the form of number of hours. So we'll say, hey, we think we could, you know, we think you need 5 hours or 10 hours. It might be 20 hours. If you're a new driver, you know, a neurotypical driver in the state of Texas, it's recommended they have 44 hours of driver's training. So that's quite a bit.
That is.
Yeah,
that's quite a bit. And, you know, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. I think it's actually really well to be hearing this because it seems a lot more thorough, and it's actually really good for brain injury survivors to know that it's not just a simply like, oh, today you should be back to better. Here you go, jump in the car and let's go. Like, I think it's really good to be hearing that there's a good process, and it's more detailed for brain injury survivors than like I want to say this, but it's not the best words, like a normal driver, right? A normal person. So I think it's really good to be hearing it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, and with brain injury, you know, of course, you know, sometimes the outcomes are quite good. You know, I'll evaluate somebody and they have that very fixed gaze, and because, you know, they're just not used to using their ocular motor skills in a dynamic way, you know, and I'll do the initial evaluation. They're looking straight ahead. They're missing stuff. The processing speed's very slow. And I'm like, wow, I don't know. But, you know, we give them some time behind the wheel, and that neuroplasticity, they start retraining their brain, and things start making connections. And like I said, we do a slow progression up. That's not everybody's course. We know that. You know, that's not everybody's course. But, you know, sometimes we do get some good outcomes, you know, and then, hey, you know, but it might have took 20 hours. It might have took 30 hours, you know, but now they're driving great. You know, and so it just all depends.
Yeah, so it's kind of like everyone says, you know, once you've met a brain injury, you've met a brain injury. So everyone is a little different on what they're going to get. Do y'all have, like, I know when I was in OT, I didn't go through a program like yours, but I know in OT I had the little car simulator, like a video game. Right. That annoyed the crap out of me.
I know. Yeah. I don't want to talk bad about driving simulators, but I think they have a tool. I think they have a place. We don't have one. We don't have one. You know, I think, you know, in the rehab center, like in a CNS or a Baylor or a PATE, you know, just to see if somebody's in the ballpark. You know, let's just see if they're even in the ballpark of getting back to driving. You know, but then actual like identifying, I don't know. You know, it's hard to say. Yeah. And then there's also simulator sickness. You know, simulator sickness is a big deal. That's not talked about enough, but that is an issue as well. So
what is that?
That, for whatever reason, the way that you're visually processing, you know, what's going on in that simulator, people get sick, and there's a percentage of people that just experience simulator sickness.
I'm having flashbacks to 16 and sitting in what's the word? I can see it. The buildings that were part of the school. You know what I mean? It was just full of these little cars, and we would sit in there for hours.
Driver's ed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sit in there for hours, and then they finally get you behind the wheel.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. We don't use them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get you behind the wheel.
Yeah. And I think that's brain injury survivors. Like, it does happen. I mean, for me, it was at an older age. I was already driving, or should have been, but city girl doesn't drive. So, yeah. So, it's good to be able to go back into what we normally use, right? And not like a video. So I think that's really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think earlier we did talk about like some accommodations and like how things the process if you have like aphasia or some cognitive issues or some visual things. So I think that's really good. We also had a question also about medication, and if you can, like, one of the questions was, are there certain medicines that are just like, if you take this certain medicine, you should not be driving at all?
No, I think that's at your doctor's discretion.
Yeah.
The doctor has a lot of power when it comes to those things. Now, if you do have seizures and you're on medication for anticonvulsions, the medical advisory board recommends that you have your driver's license updated. And I can't remember the name of the restriction. We could look it up. But basically, there's a restriction, just like we were talking about. I have a restriction for corrective lenses. You have a T restriction for automatic transmission. These folks have this restriction that says they cannot operate a passenger vehicle to include taxi cabs, school buses, or emergency vehicles.
Okay.
Because they're on that medication.
Sure.
Now, if they want to get into that down the road and come off that medication, the doctor, at the end of the day, it's at the doctor's discretion. We used to say that in the Army. It's at the commander's discretion. It's at the doctor's discretion. There is a form, and the form is called a DL, that's for driver's license, 177. That's a DPS form. And the medical advisory board they've said that they're going to stop using this form. But I like it, and they're using it right now. And on the form, it says, this driver is under your care for this diagnosis. They're on these medications. In your professional opinion, do you recommend they return to driving? Yes or no? Then the next line is, in your professional opinion, do you recommend they need further testing? Yes or no? Then at the bottom of that form, the doctor has to put his medical license on it. And he faxes that to Austin. To me, that's a great form.
Sure.
But I've heard there's talks that they're going to do away with that or revamp it. But, that's one of those situations where the doctor should fill that form out and say, yeah, hey, look, she drives with this medication, but I think she's safe to return to driving. Here's my medical license number. I'll put that behind that. Because here's my whole thing. Your doctor says, okay, I think it's okay for you to return to driving. Okay, too easy. Fill out this form and give me a copy and fax it to Austin. That's it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that makes... I mean, if that were me, I would be very safe. I would feel very also confident on myself just by simply saying, this doctor believes in me and like supports me and me moving forward to my independence.
And if they don't feel comfortable filling out the form, okay. But it's a lot of times, my doctor said I'm fine. Okay.
Right.
Just fill out this form. Because if you get in a wreck and hurt or kill somebody, I just want a little bit of liability coverage. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know what can happen in the court of law.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, I have a question. I know we've talked a lot about aphasia as far as how it affects your speech and that kind of, but what about, I guess, more cognitive, if the aphasia is affecting them with reading, and let's say that, they maybe can't read the street signs well enough or the street names, so they're always passing them. Is there things you can do to help with that?
That's where I really think you need to come to our program, or a program like our program, and we can further test that. Like, can you compensate with GPS? Can you compensate? Now, receptive aphasia, can you understand the verbal language? Or do you have, or maybe you can't. And but can you visually look at it and says that, okay, that's telling me I need to go right at the next street, or I need to make a left at the next street? Or am I just going to stay in an area that I know, that I have memorized? Those are recommendations that we can make. And so our goal is we want to keep you independent for as long as possible, And we will provide those recommendations. Hey, stay in your area. Because when you get out of your area, you get lost.
Sure.
I think saying we got 10 minutes. But so does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah. Aphasia is tough. I mean, I've seen people most of the time, not most of the time, but I've had a couple people with aphasia that are excellent drivers. Mm-hmm. But for me to provide like audible instruction, it just was not going to happen. I had to do hand gestures. And that's what I'm talking about when they retake the road test. Some of those accommodations could be, hey, that evaluator knows that they can't understand language and that they give them audible, physical cues.
Yeah. And that notification, it just means to give us a little pause. Like, let's slow down a little bit. So basically, yeah. So just giving all of our listeners just some time to remember to press like on all of the buttons and follow us every Thursday so we can continue having all these conversations. And then we go back to you.
Okay. All right.
That's about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then on aphasia, you know about the communication impediment.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about that.
Yeah, we did. I shouldn't have been the one to speak right now because I forgot my question. So basically, oh my goodness, I'm like totally brain dead right now. I had a question about basically right now what you were talking about with driving. Oh, yes. So for evaluations that you were talking about earlier, when I was in rehabilitation, my I can't say these words, but the evaluation I did that told me I had aphasia went along with my family. Do you do these is there a certain part of the driving and what you teach and what you evaluate and then also tell people, do you also do that for the families present so that they know
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, we highly recommend a family member is there.
Yeah.
Or a loved one, whoever. Yeah, and we bring them in. A lot of times we bring them in for that initial interview, and I'm like, okay, does this line up? And sometimes the family member has to help out quite a bit.
Sure.
Especially with aphasia. And then at the end, the family member is there for the recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's so important because a lot of the times, yes, we are the client, we're the patient or the client. We are the person that has to take these actions, but really we're also with our caregivers, our family, our friends, our supporters that are kind of like backing us up. So
right.
we, keeping them informed is something very important.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And I think that was something very valuable for my experience, that I had a really good support system. So I think that's awesome. You offer that too.
Yeah.
Now, there's one thing that we didn't talk about that it's not really, I guess it's a legal requirement, but how does having a brain injury when you go back to driving, can it or does it affect your car insurance? Like how?
It should not. They should not be able to discriminate against you under that Disabilities Act. What is it? The ADA. That legislation.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know.
They should not be able to discriminate against you on that. Now, if you have modifications done to your vehicle, we recommend that you let your insurance know, because if you get in a wreck and those are destroyed, they could potentially pay for those.
Okay.
But they're not supposed to be able to allow to raise your rates or adjust your rates because you have a disability.
Oh, that's really strong. That's really good to understand and to know, right?
Right.
Because there's a lot of limitations that I think as brain injury survivors we put on ourselves, right? Like, oh, I can't do this because this happened to me. But no, there should not be any limitation that others place on ourselves.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And just so you know, I mean, we talked about the retaking the road test and all that. Eventually you have to go into the DPS, depending on your age. And when you go in and fill out that application, they're going to ask you if you have any of those medical conditions. So.
Yeah. And so then when asked those questions, there's no negativity to say yes, I had a stroke.
No, I don't think so. It will it kind of be tedious? Yeah. They're going to, there's, yes, potentially you got to take the road test. Potentially you're going to get this big packet in the mail. and you got to go to your neurologist or maybe even your visual neuro-optometrist, and you got to get all this stuff filled out. Then you got to fax it to Austin. Then they got to sit in front of the board, and so on and so forth. But you're covered from a liability standpoint.
Right. And I think that's the most important part that we want to get across to all of our listeners and to other brain injured survivors. I know my friend Carl and I tell people that all the time. It's really as simple as CYA.
Correct.
And I'm not going to spell that out because we're a family podcast. But I think everybody knows what I mean. But yeah, it is if you get in a wreck and the other person's attorney finds out you've had a brain injury, they're going to do everything within their power to prove that it was because of your brain injury and it was not their client's fault.
Right. And they might even come back and sue me. That's happened. I have a colleague down in Houston, and he's been doing this for like 35, 40 years. And Chad Stromat, if you're down in Houston, listen to this podcast. Stromat's a great rehab driver company. And we get together and talk every once in a while. And it's just amazing, what the lawyers can get cooked up, and it's terrible, but it is what it is, and so. Yeah. But yeah, eventually you're going to have to go into the DPS and you're going to have to check that box. So why not? Let's get ahead of it.
Right.
And then they can always call. We're not going to charge you, to help you through that process.
Sure.
We're going to educate you for free. And if I need to, I'll call one of the local managers. Not saying I can pull any strings or anything, but the answers to these questions are not always out front. You got to kind of do some research, and it's subjective.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we beat that dead horse. You've had a brain injury. I think you should retake the road test.
Sure. I know I retook it, like I said, for my own peace of mind. And maybe not just for my own peace of mind, but I bet for my mom and dad's too.
But guess what? You go to this Plano DPS right here, and I don't care that I'm calling them out. It is what it is. The manager right here in Plano doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
And she's telling people, no, don't do that. You're opening up a can of worms. Well, once again, just write that out, ma'am, and sign it. And let me get your point of contact. So if I get in a wreck or kill somebody, I'll just say the manager at Plano DPS said I didn't have to retake the road test.
Sure,
because I wouldn't want to open up a can of worms. You got to advocate for yourself. That's what in your family, that's what you got to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think a lot of the times with a lot of the questions you've reiterated, like it's to our benefit and then also to advocate, right? You just said to advocate for ourselves. I wanted to just ask a last question of what would you really like to say, in shortest way possible, to go on with the independence and going back to driving? What are the needs for a brain injury survivor, for family and supporters? What would be your best advice?
Well, like I said, just if you feel like, you're ready to return to driving, I would just consult with, like you said, the family members, and maybe you have a therapist, your OT or your speech therapist, and say, hey, what do you think? You think I need further evaluation? And maybe they don't know, and then that's when you come see me, and ask your neurologist. We were talking earlier, if you feel like that. You've made some big gains, and it's been a couple years, talk to your neurologist. Hey, I feel like, I might have made some big gains, and then come see somebody like me, and we can do that evaluation. You can get that peace of mind because I'm going to do all that testing, and then I'm going to get in the car and watch you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do this every day. This is all I do.
And then talk to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So...
Awesome. Well, I would love to thank you so much for giving up your time to come here and then do making us aware and educating us on going back into driving after a brain injury. Mm-hmm. It has taken some time, and we're so grateful for you coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you again to all of our listeners for listening. And if you'd like to contact us, again, you can always email us at bindwaves@thebind.org. Follow us on Instagram at bindwaves. And again, if you're interested in becoming a member or a volunteer, that's just the bind.org website has all that information on there as well. And we look forward to hearing from y'all. And if you have any ideas for us to talk about, we're here to do that.
Yeah, and also based on all the conversations, we will be having them and sharing it, everything on our description. So you can contact all of our resources. And just obviously don't forget to like and share all of our episodes that come out on every Thursday, and obviously check out YouTube so you could see us.
And again, every Thursday we'll be live on all your favorite platforms. So until next time.
Until next time.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Bind Waves and continue to support Bind and our nonprofit mission.
We support brain injury survivors as they reconnect into the life, the community, and their workplace.
And we couldn't do that without great listeners like you. We appreciate each and every one of you. Continue watching. Until next time.
Until next time.